Hi, I'm Santa Clara County Supervisor Dave Cortese, and welcome to our regular Saturday Town Hall discussion and COVID update. We have been doing this for several weeks now. We took a little break on the Independence Day weekend for obvious reasons, and I imagine some of you who have been following these town halls every Saturday were happy to have a break. But there's a lot to talk about this week. I'm going to sort of give you a brief recap on the indicators I always touch on, which are kind of unique to what I watch. And I want to introduce our special guest. But before I introduce him, let me just say that there were 5,863 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the county and 166 deaths as of Friday. And as you know, I always mention the deaths. You know that if you watch this from time to time, not because of any focus I have on mortality or death per se, but it's always occurred to me since the pandemic started that as long as we're tracking the mortality rate, it is one of those indicators that just simply doesn't lie. We have to watch everything else, hospitalizations, we'll talk about that today. We have to look at testing results and percentages and a lot of other things and what's happening worldwide, nationwide. But you know, it seems as a public servant, one of the most fundamental things we can do is just look at how many people are surviving in our own county, who isn't, and try to focus on that and make sure that we're obviously mitigating that as much as possible. Our hearts go out to all the families who have suffered a tragedy within their family. I know it's certainly struck families among my friends and extended family, and the disease itself spares no one. Anyone can be a victim of it. So we're going to talk about all of that a little bit more today with our special guest today. He is Deputy County Executive David Campos. He doesn't need this extra introduction I'm going to give him, but just in case some of you pay a lot of attention to Bay Area politics and what's happening in the region, he was once a San Francisco County Supervisor not so long ago. We actually served together in a regional capacity in places like the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and in other regional government functions. He's been a tremendous leader, and we were very fortunate to have him join the County of Santa Clara some time ago as a Deputy County Executive, meaning he reports directly to Dr. Jeff Smith, our County Executive. And part of the reason that's important is because we have somebody on the executive team here today to help answer your questions at a time when things have been changing quite a bit, not just numbers and percentages, but the rules have been changing by design. Dr. Sarah Cody is in steady contact with Mr. Campos. He is part of the Emergency Operations Center where decisions are made. He is functioning as a public information officer for the Emergency Operations Center, so he's part of his job, part of his vocation right at this moment is to save lives by getting information out there to help protect people and to help explain the rules to some degree. So we may not have all the answers today, and I certainly don't want to put any pressure on our special guest, but we do know that you'll call in with questions, you'll text in with questions. The way to do that is listed right on the screen, and we're happy to take our best stab at giving you answers. And if we can't answer, we'll tell you how to get the answer by Monday, because there's certainly an answer to every question that can be posed, I think, on this topic. So, except how to stop the virus completely. That's the one answer we haven't come up with. So with that, let me introduce Deputy County Executive David Campos and have him do a little bit more of a self-introduction, maybe just a few words from you about what it's like to be in the EOC.
Sure.
That wasn't something
right
that you planned on as far as your resume, but it's been all hands on deck for a while now. And,
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Supervisor Cortese. And as you noted, I've had the pleasure of serving with you on regional government, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And, it's really one of the reasons that I was really excited to come to Santa Clara, having seen through that work, watching Supervisor Chavez, and all that Santa Clara has done to really be leading on so many different fronts. So that's been exciting and proven to be true. And in many respects, the way that Santa Clara County has approached the response to the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, illustrates how this county has really become a leader in the state, in the region, in the country. So I was asked to come to the Emergency Operations Center, really for the purpose of helping disseminate public information. And I think that having been a supervisor and being an elected, I think that gives you a perspective in terms of the importance of public information, how to interact with the media, but also the different ways in which information needs to be disseminated. And when I came over to the Emergency Operations Center, my goal was to really develop the information dissemination piece into a model for the region, the state, and the country. And I think in many respects we have achieved that, because what we have tried to do is to make sure that we provide as much information as possible, that we are as transparent as we can be. So one of the first things we did is we started doing more media. We developed a Facebook Live, and now the county is essentially running 5 different websites in 5 different languages. We have Facebook pages in different languages. We create information in different languages, not just translate what we provide in English, but actually create information with monolingual speakers in those languages, to the point that some of our pieces of information, some of our public service announcements have reached a viral status, going viral in other parts of the world. Vietnamese being a good example. Some of our Vietnamese PSAs have had millions of hits because people in Vietnam are watching them.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Very proud of that, and of course that's also a reflection of the work of the board, right? Because the board has really prioritized that and made it clear to the administration. So in that sense, we are really, an extension of what the board wants to see an EOC that's connected to community.
Well, if it's going right, we take credit for it. And if it goes wrong, we tell everyone
We
to
know
call
how
the
that
Emergency
is.
Operations Center. So I'll introduce the rest of the team here in a moment, but why don't we take a question or two? Tara?
So the first question texted in is, will we be able to maintain the reopening schedule given the current surge in cases?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want David Campos to really take a crack at this one, because he's even closer than I am, obviously, to the EOC. But of course, we're all watching the rapid increase in hospitalizations more than anything.
Sure.
David, can you speak to that?
Sure.
What's that look like from inside the EOC to watch those numbers go up and to be concerned about opening?
Well, we watch numbers on a regular basis. We actually, look at the numbers not just at a daily basis, but actually throughout the day. We're analyzing them. And, we have been fortunate in Santa Clara that up to now we have had the lowest per capita number of cases in the state. We've been sort of like fighting, with San Francisco in terms of who has that spot. But in terms of large counties, we've had that. We have seen an increase, nevertheless, and in many respects, the increase is something that is a natural result of what has happened, because we have seen more openings in different parts of the economy. We've had most of our businesses, small, large, open in Santa Clara County. We also know that there are a couple of things that happen, especially around Memorial Day, perhaps around 4th of July, where there have been more gatherings with people are not necessarily taking the precautions. So we are watching this carefully, and it's not something that's specific to the county of Santa Clara. It's something that is happening throughout the region and throughout the state. That said, we believe that we can move forward with the proposal that we have laid out. And the idea behind this is that shelter in place has a very important role, right? Mm-hmm. And shelter in place was a very useful tool, an effective tool to contain the spread of the virus. But you do reach a point after which shelter in place no longer on its own becomes the right strategy. And so the next phase is to go into a phase of risk reduction that recognizes that for us to have a long-term strategy with the virus, that it's not sustainable to have people shelter in place, indefinitely. And so the right approach, if you have contained the virus to the point that you have enough of an infrastructure, contact tracing, testing to deal with the cases you have, that you move into risk reduction. And that actually becomes a very important tool, because it really is the only thing that we have short of a vaccine or a cure to deal with a virus that's going to be around, right? It's how we as individuals and how we as businesses, how we behave, how we act with one another, relative to one another. And so that's why under this phase we are able and confident that if people follow the rules that we have laid out, a lot of things can resume, provided that those guidelines are actually followed.
Yeah, and I know we have another question, but something I want to come back to after the next question, if we have time, is these new rules. What people are calling an expanded opening on the 13th of July. I mean, that's tomorrow. Basically, all the protocols have to be in the next 24 hours or 48 hours, as I understand it. But they're not easier rules. At some point, I want you to talk about the fact that the new rules for reopening are actually very, very restrictive, and people are unfortunately, in a sense, going to find that out when they go back to their barber or their hair salon or their nail salon, because it's not going to be like it used to be.
You're letting a lot of things resume, but in a very different way. It is really the new normal is not what it used to be, right? And so that means, by the way, that businesses that are resuming operations for the first time have to file these new plans. Also, the businesses that are actually already open under the existing order have to file these new plans, and they have to do so under penalty of perjury. And the reason we did that is because we want people to understand the importance of being truthful. So there are specific guidelines, including restrictions on the number of people you can have inside. There is a 250 square rule per person in terms of employees, 150 per customer. So very strict guidelines that are trying to keep people safe if they follow them.
Yeah, I used to go to a barber that everyone used to sit around in close quarters. It looked like something like a throwback. And there was usually sports on the TV, and there were little kids running around, and they'd jump in your lap, and
Right.
everyone would be talking, and you'd get most of the local news just by sitting in the shop. Those days are over for now, right? And that's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
Tara?
So we've had a lot of questions come in, and one is from Chuck Stevens from IATSC Local 134, their Theatrical Stage Employees Union. And Chuck says, thank you both for keeping us up to date, and thanks for your service. My question is in regards to the entertainment industry. Our industry has gone with everyone local out of work. What will gatherings in the entertainment industry look like? For instance, the San Jose Convention Center.
Yeah, well, this is where the new rules change things, because as I understand it, David, please explain this as best you can. It's not so much what industry it is, with a few exceptions, but it's about the density of the amount of people that you put in. So I'm thinking the answer here is, look, if you can figure out a way to do entertainment and still keep the 150-foot distance requirements, then it works. Is that a short answer?
Well, I think it's a two-part answer. In many respects, you're right. We're not focusing on the type of business or the type of activity, but there are some things that by their nature are not allowed, and so there are things where, for instance, you have large gatherings where even though you might be able in some respects to keep the desired distance, the health officer doesn't believe that a large gathering makes sense.
Especially indoors.
Especially indoors. And there are certain principles, by the way, like indoors is safer than outdoors. So movie theaters, the types of large gatherings in the convention center that perhaps the gentleman is talking about, those would not be allowed. Even something like indoor dining is not going to be allowed because there are certain principles that need to be followed. One, indoors is safer than outdoors. You have to wear your mask.
Outdoors is safer than.
I'm sorry, outdoors is safer than indoors, and even when you're indoors, you have to wear your mask. And so if you're indoors and you're dining, you're not really able to do that. So there are certain things that by their nature are not allowed. Everything